you on an antidepressant, benzodiazepine or antipsychotic? Don't worry, I got it. Doctor, I'm feeling down. Chemical imbalance, you say? No side effects. Okay. Could it be the fact I lost my job and my boss is a bit of a knob? What's the root of the issue? Doctors will just dismiss you. But you're okay, because today you're listening to the Psych Sanctuary.
Hi, and welcome to the Psych Sanctuary podcast with me, Emma. And today I am joined with Harry, who is going to be interviewing me, asking me all sorts of interesting questions. And he also basically filmed this, produced this, helped create this to be awesome. This is Wicket, which some of you might have already seen. I'm just going to introduce you. Here we are. There's Wicket. There we go. So yeah, he's going to knock the mic. And he kind of snores and it sounds like farting. So I'm actually going to put him down, but he needs to be involved. So I just wanted to introduce him. Okay. So where to begin? I did an interview with Ollie before, years ago. Well, I don't know how many years it was now. I lose track of time. But I thought it would be really good to do another video to reset and for all the new followers coming to this page. And also because this podcast is like going to be really cool. So I'm resetting.
So first question, what's your motivation for starting this podcast?
My motivation for starting this podcast is I know that this is really important and needs to be taken seriously. And I thought that doing it really well like this, with your help, would make it feel more like a proper thing. Mm-hmm. So people might actually tune in and watch it. Because I have done videos before with my friend Ollie, which was great, that interview about my experience. So I will go over what happened to me again for new followers, but also it really is to empower those who have gone through this experience with harm from medication, because it is very taboo. Currently, it's not really spoken about in the medical communities at all, apart from some people online talking about it. So it's just really important to have these online spaces because it saved my life when I was going through it.
And what sort of conversations are you hoping to create by putting this out there into the world?
I would like women to feel empowered in the fact that it's okay to have emotions and be sensitive and have periods and go through menopause and maybe have bad skin and, all sorts of things that we go through without being medicated. It would be great to start the conversation of other ways of dealing with certain things, because I really see a lot of women coming through who have been medicated for things that they didn't need to be medicated for. And also conversations in general, people going in and being medicated for things that they didn't need to be medicated for. And just trying to think of different ways, because these medications do have a dark side. And I want that dark side to be brought into the light, and so we can change things.
I'd love for you to share some of your personal journey now, like what brought you to this point.
Okay. So, yes, where to start? I'm aware that Harry has heard this story before, and maybe some of you have heard it as well, but I am aware that new people will be coming to the channel, and I think it is important to share it. Yeah? So you ready for me to just...
Yeah, start from the beginning. I'm all ears.
Yeah? Okay. I will try and break so then you can say something. Yeah? So, where to begin? I was given lorazepam in the pandemic. Lorazepam is a benzodiazepine, and it is meant for crisis situations, not a long-term usage, but some doctors do give it out long term, unfortunately. I was given that for tinnitus, and basically I got tinnitus ringing in my ears in the pandemic after getting COVID. I went to a private doctor. It was really impossible to go to any NHS doctor because it was COVID. I went to this guy, he came recommended, and the first thing that he said was, take this medication. He didn't even look at my ears. He didn't recommend me to go to an ENT, which is actually what I was after, ear, nose and throat, because I was worried about the ringing. I'd never had that before. It was very loud. And he said, take this medication. I give it to old people and it will help you calm and help you sleep. And if you don't sleep, then your tinnitus is going to get worse. And that was really my fear. I was sleeping. I had broken sleep, but I was still sleeping. I wasn't like complete insomniac from the tinnitus, but I was worried it could get to that stage. So that was my kind of logic, because before this, I had never taken a medication long term like this, and I'd never gone down the medication route. I remember being offered Prozac actually in my teens, but I decided not to go down that route because I know that I'm very sensitive. I get drunk really easily. The couple of times I've smoked weed, I just vomit all over the floor. Like, I'm just not somebody that, I'm happy on my own high in terms of, just laughing and being sober. However, obviously I did used to drink a bit. It was unusual for me to take this medication basically, but I was worried and I was trusting him, and I trusted him because he came recommended, and he's somebody that I had gone to once before for something completely unrelated. So I ended up taking it for 6 months, 1 milligram a night for sleep. And this was advised by the doctor to take it for this long. Through this time, I really declined. It was only a month in that I really started to feel the decline, like shaking, losing weight, sleep getting so much worse, waking up in the morning with surges of terror, really extreme stuff, having really dark thoughts, feeling really depressed, really emotional all the time. This was not recognized. And obviously, because it's a pandemic, I've got the tinnitus, there's lots of other factors going on here. So I was like, maybe I'm going mad, which a lot of people think when this happens to them, because it can mimic the very thing that you went in for, anxiety, depression. But looking back, it was a month. At that point, I went online, started to have a look, and it said, do not take this medication for any longer than 2 to 4 weeks at most. And I started seeing that it was addictive, and there was all this addiction language, which I find really misleading and very irritating, because people don't get addicted like a drug addict, but their body gets physically addicted. So it's not like you're taking it to get high. Well, I wasn't. When you're taking it as a prescription medication, you're taking it because you've been told to take it and that it's going to help you. So I just wanted to say that, because the addiction thing's very irritating and people will relate to me with that who have gone through this. Saw that all online, asked the doctor, what is this all about? And he said, don't read Dr. Google. It's fine. It's safe. It won't be the medication. Maybe you need to look for other things, for example, other ways of helping yourself. There were suggestions of antidepressants from another doctor. I started to sort of seek help, different places, different opinions, and no one recognized that actually it was the benzo that was causing this. I got worse and worse and worse through these 6 months. I tried everything, like equine therapy, cranial sacral therapy, Reiki, talking therapy. Equine therapy is therapy with horses. I did so many things in that time to try and calm my nervous system. I thought that I was having some sort of response to the tinnitus, and I went into my childhood traumas and grabbed onto all these things. It could be this, it could be that, when actually nothing I did touched the sides of helping this terror, this anxiety, this insomnia, it got to the point where all day I was like shaking. And it got so bad that when I took the medication, it didn't really do anything. I'd probably go to sleep for like 2 to 3 hours, and then I'd wake up, 3 a.m. and I'd then be so desperate that I would take half of this lorazepam in the morning. And I was told by another doctor that actually you could do that. I had all these varying opinions, like if you're feeling really bad in the morning, take half or a quarter and maybe it will, help. So that's what I did. But then it started this horrible cycle of interdose withdrawal, which a lot of people I know will know what I'm talking about, where it's basically stopped working really, and you're reaching a tolerance with it. So you take it and it will only work for a very short while. And when it stops working, you start to experience really horrible withdrawal side effects. For example, terror and shaking and all the stuff. That's what started to happen, and I was in this loop. So I decided, through doing research online, to come off the medication. I had this intuition that it was the medication, and something just really wasn't right. I'd never been like this before in my life. I found Angie Peacock online, who's on YouTube, and she's now obviously helping people through this and has been for years. It was her videos those years back that really helped me. And I started to piece things together because she was on lorazepam too. And I found Benzo Buddies, Benzo Warrior Community, Surviving Antidepressants, all these online forums and help websites basically for people going through this. And I was like, this is a thing. These are the symptoms I'm experiencing. I started to realize it was a thing. And I said to the doctor, I really want to come off this. I'm not feeling well. His advice was to come off it in 2 weeks. So that's what I did, which was horrific. And it really blew my nervous system apart. It took about a week to feel the effects of that. And bearing in mind, lockdown is happening. I spend some time with my dad in Spain because I was so unwell and unstable that I needed support, whereas normally I'd be in London. So I had to go back and forth. I had to somehow, I can't remember quite rightly right now, but I had to get a letter to say that I had to go to Spain because obviously no one was supposed to be flying. But I had to go there, and I had to, for medical reasons and all this stuff. And it was really complicated and stressful. I needed the support. I needed someone there to look after me. When I did come off the benzo, I did actually decide to go back to London. And I thought, I feel okay. And I thought it would be fine for some reason. But the thing is no one knows about this stuff. So I thought, I'll come off it and it'll be fine. So I got back. And like I say, it was about a week, 5 days to a week before I really felt the full wrath of this withdrawal catching up with me. And then it was from that point onwards that things just really escalated. I completely lost my sleep from that point onwards. There was no sleep. And I was in my friend's flat, bless her, pacing, with akathisia around her living room while she's trying to work from home. It was really wild. And a lot of friends had to kind of step in. No one really understood what was going on. Everyone thought I was having a mental breakdown. I went to various specialists at that point, actually. I went to a benzodiazepine specialist who was very expensive, kind of like a typical psychiatrist who went and saw me and I was, really kind of erratic. He did do the common thing of labeling me with all sorts of things, like diagnoses, because I was displaying in such an erratic manner, which is the problem with withdrawal because people really misunderstand that. But he did say, it looks like you're in benzo withdrawal. From that point onwards, I just was trying my hardest to work out what to do. He said to reinstate the drug again and then taper off it really slowly. Unfortunately, because I'd gone fully into this withdrawal and it was in the acute phase, this reinstatement didn't work and it actually made me worse. So I was in this horrible place, was getting worse and worse and worse and worse. And then there was other opinions from other doctors saying, why don't you do a straight switch to Valium? Because Valium is longer acting. Lorazepam's short acting. Valium lasts for way longer, like over a whole day. There was no mention of a crossover or a gentle crossover, just a straight switch, which I did. And I was just desperate. I think when you're in that place, you're desperate, you're terrified. I was having really strong suicidal thoughts, thinking I was going to die. There was no let up. There was no moment where I felt okay. I felt like I was dying. So I was really trying to take any sort of advice I could, not knowing that obviously no one knows about this apart from these online communities. And so I took a whole load of terrible advice, and this Valium was a terrible thing to do because that straight switch, it really, it was already bad, but that really shit hit the fan. And I started to run up and down and bash my head against the wall, really smashing my head on the wall and just wanting it to end. The torture is so bad. It's almost like you're on fire from the inside and you just want to do anything to get rid of the pain because it's so extreme. I was in this state basically. I'd gone back to Spain. So there was a lot of back and forth because I needed to be somewhere where I could be taken care of. I couldn't drive. I couldn't do anything. And my dad, he wanted to take me to the hospital because I became so erratic. And I was saying, I want to die. I want euthanasia. Please, I want a peaceful death. I was just repeating this over and over again because I'm not sleeping. And the whole day, I'm basically being burnt alive with this experience. I understand why he took me to the hospital because what do you do? Unfortunately, Spanish hospitals, they don't know anything about medication and they're very, very black and white. Medication, she looks mentally ill, medication. So I was there, I explained what happened to me with the benzos and the lorazepam, and this woman just looked at me and she said, no, that's not possible. But we do have medication that can help you. And, saying this to my dad and saying, I think the best thing that should happen is she should go into a psychiatric unit and we'll look after her there. She'll have 24/7 round the clock attention and we have some stuff that will help her. Now, having looked at the forums and knowing that taking more medication was not a good thing to do, knowing how I felt and having taken the lorazepam and how horrific that made me feel, and then the Valium, which made me feel worse, I was just terrified. And I tried to escape from the hospital, but then I had these security guards pick me up and throw me back in. I was treated like I was an absolute lunatic that needed to be locked up. And it was terrifying. So I ended up in the psychiatric unit up there. No one spoke English. So it was very different to this English-speaking nurse or psychiatrist saying, oh, she's going to be looked after. And no one spoke English. And I was put in a horrible room with restraints on the beds, other people in there that were very unstable as well. None of them spoke English. And I was just pummeled with medication. Olanzapine, which is an antipsychotic, sertraline, an antidepressant, and they stopped the benzos altogether. So again, the Valium that I was taking was just stopped. I was a mess and I felt like I was melting on the floor. I couldn't move my limbs. It was horrifying. I don't know how I got through that. I was in there for 3 days. It felt like 3 years. And I passed out lots of times, which they wrote on my form that I had hypertension. But I think for me, that was just the over-medicating, just giving me so much medication that I just went. I'm surprised that I came back, to be honest. I managed to get out of there because I had to have a meeting with the head nurse. She's almost like a Mrs. Trunchbull figure from Matilda. And I just pulled in all my acting skills somehow to try and remain still and have a conversation where I appeared normal, to sort of say, yeah, I want to go back to the UK and I want to get on with my music and my acting career and I'm absolutely fine. But actually inside I was melting. Like I don't know how I did that, but she let me go. And at this point, things got pretty ugly with the psychiatric units. And my dad had really lost all hope. He really didn't believe it was the medication. He'd gone full, she's lost her mind. She needs to be in this psychiatric unit. He was feeling, I think, like it was taking up his life and it was a lot, basically. And he didn't know what to do. Things were tricky because he didn't believe it was the medication. And looking back with perspective, I kind of get it because it was so extreme. But on the other hand, it was so extreme. And I had never been like this before. And it was clear that there was a lot wrong with me. Like I was losing weight. I looked really unwell. I had this sort of movement disorder. I couldn't stop moving. So it's obviously quite severe. So yeah, things got ugly. And I didn't have anyone really that believed me at all. And all sorts happened. So I'm sure people who are watching this, they'll understand that there's no way that I could go through all the colours of this, but I'm just going through the important points of this because I know so many people struggle with their families and friends not believing them. And it's really horrific to go through that and be in such a severe state. So yeah, got out of there. I'm at my dad's, pacing around. I'm so much worse than I was before. I'm really suicidal at this point because I'm like, well, I've been in a psychiatric unit. I'm not going to get better because I'm looking on the forums, the drug forums, and I'm listening to other people's advice. And there doesn't seem to be anyone that knows what to do. And I've done all the wrong things. I've kindled, I've been polydrugged, I've all the stuff. And so I basically, not to kind of trigger anybody, because I'm here right now. But this is part of it, is suicidal ideation, is that I did try and take my life a number of times, but I didn't know how to do it. I didn't want to do it. I didn't actually want to do it. But what I did want is I wanted the suffering to stop. It was that bad. And so I kind of went through this sort of looping cycle. Every day I would pace around my dad's garden. He'd be shouting at me. People would be shouting. It was an absolute horror show. And then I would be thinking of constant ways of how to end my life, basically. Begging for the euthanasia. If I stayed there in Spain, I would only just end up in that psychiatric unit. I ended up having a phone call with my mum. Me and my mum do have a quite tense relationship, and that is a shame. And I wish it wasn't like that. I did have a conversation with her. And at this point, I'm emaciated. I look like I'm dying on a video call. And she said, oh my God, what's going on? And basically she actually got on a plane and she came over. And I think this was still COVID time, so it wasn't easy to do that. So she came and got me. We got on a plane back to the UK. And wow, that plane journey in that state, I felt like I was being crushed by the universe. I felt like my bones were breaking and everything was just crunching, and it was absolutely terrifying. And I was really paranoid that I was going to be put back into a psychiatric unit any moment. I was just really in a bad place. Got back to mum's somehow. And there it just I just declined because I wasn't sleeping. That was the thing. And I had this akathisia and I'd been so polydrugged, so much stress. I think I just, it took its toll on me. And within about a month, I was in a full psychosis. My mum's house is quite small. She's got a little art studio in the garden, and I'd spend all day pacing her living room in a circle, and all night. There was not one moment from this point onwards, there was not one moment. I mean, even before that, I didn't sleep, but this was like, I just remember pacing and pacing. All hours, I remember the foxes outside, like going through the trash, and I'd just be up pacing and watching the foxes go through the trash. And my mum would be in her bed and she'd occasionally come down and say, "Oh my God, for God's sakes, go to bed." And she was really starting to get at her wit's end. And as I said, we did have a very tense relationship, and things can get quite volatile, which it definitely did. But I don't really want to go too much into that, because I always think I don't want to shame anyone or blame anyone. And it's not really about that. But I think it is important that some people are in families that are quite frictious, and that can add an absolute horrendous layer to this. Obviously she's there and she doesn't know what to do. And she kind of goes in and out of thinking that it's the medication. Like, she's a bit more holistic, my mum. So she was like, this isn't right. This is so severe. She was looking at me thinking, shit, something's really not right here. But on the other hand, she'd flip back to, because the doctors aren't, thinking it's anything and keep on saying that it's me. No one's saying it's the medication. So it's quite hard, I think, as well, for people to understand it. I get so bad that I'm 5 stone, pacing her living room, full psychosis. Doctors come round to observe me and they say, if we don't get her into a psychiatric unit, then she's going to die. Her organs will give up. They came round. I refused to leave the house. I thought everyone was trying to kill me, which in a way, like with the medical system, I was absolutely terrified. But everything was a full hallucination at this point. Everyone looked like the devil. Nurses would come into the house and they would look like devils. And my mum looked like the devil. It was like monstrous. I'd be looking on my phone and my phone would be talking to me. The psychosis went from mild initially, like paranoia, to like absolute severity. Nothing was real anymore. Even my dog, Wicket, he looked like a monster and I thought he was going to eat me. I had sensations as well where I couldn't breathe and I was going like the whole time and just pacing. I thought I was on Mars at one point. A lot happened. There was a lot that happened in that sort of psychosis time. So because of this, they had to get police round basically, because I refused to leave the house. And I actually wrestled the police into the ambulance. I really didn't want to go. And it was just the wildest experience, what I was experiencing, and getting in that ambulance and going to a psychiatric unit where I ended up being for 2 weeks. And I was given risperidone and mirtazapine. Risperidone is an antipsychotic. Mirtazapine is an antidepressant. I was also given lots of other stuff, but it's so hard to know what was what. And I would spend all day, every day and night pacing in that psychiatric unit. I don't know how I survived that. I was on an acute ward, Ward 2 of Springfield Hospital in the UK. And apparently that's known as, well, you can go on Google reviews and look up Springfield Hospital, and dare I say any more, it's pretty horrific. And I can vouch for those reviews that yes, it is like that. It's really scary, and abuse happens in there from the staff. And obviously you're with patients that are unstable, but it's also the staff as well. Like the whole place is just completely wild. And I can't imagine how people get better in those places. So anyway, they discharged me. I'm not better, but for some reason they just discharged me. There was all sorts of things going on in the hospital and really unprofessional. Didn't call my mum up to say she's coming home. So somehow, with akathisia and still with psychosis, with a whole load more medication, I get into a taxi, I get home to my mum's, and my mum's like, "What are you doing back? No one called? Like, what are you doing here?" And again, I'm not good. And, she's sort of looking at me like, "Oh no, not the pacing again," and I'm back to pacing, and it's just awful. She's trying to watch her countdown. It's not countdown she watches, but some sort of game show she watches every day. And I'm in the living room just pacing, and she's just like, "Oh, for fuck's sake, something, it's like something out of a really dark film. And anyway, lots happened in that time. And I will go into more of that in the later episodes because there's so much I could say. But basically, I end up coming off the risperidone and the mirtazapine because the nurses from the hospital said, she can just stop taking it. I'm not in my right mind. It doesn't feel like it's helping me. In fact, I feel like I'm melting. I just kept on feeling like I couldn't use my limbs and all sorts was going on. Like nothing was normal, no sensation, my eyesight, my hearing, my speech, my movement, everything was out. I wasn't Emma. I thought, okay, I'll stop taking it. But what that meant was I went back into a withdrawal again from the risperidone, having already been in a withdrawal. I became incontinent. At this point, my mum is just like, I can't deal, I really can't deal with this. And we got the police round, she got the police round again and said, if I don't go voluntarily into a psychiatric unit, then I will be sectioned again. So somehow I get a taxi, I go to the psychiatric unit, third psychiatric unit. And I'm thinking at this point, well, obviously my life's over. And I would have ended it way before any of this. I mean, this is like, I shouldn't be alive right now. But I just couldn't. I was too terrified to do it. I could not do it. Because you're in a state of terror. And it's so terrifying having to do that, especially when you don't want to do it. Anyway, so there I am. Okay, I'll go to the psychiatric unit and maybe they'll give me all this medication that will put me to sleep forever. And that's what I was kind of hoping. Maybe that would do it. I get in there, they give me quetiapine, which goes up to 400 milligrams, mirtazapine 30 milligrams. And occasionally they give me codeine and various things. They like to give you all sorts like antihistamines and various things. They just like to kind of keep flushing through. That was horrific. I was in there for 2 months. Lots happened in there. Yeah. There was a moment where a nurse gave me 2 milligrams of lorazepam because there was something in me I was like, I need to try and take the lorazepam again. And I remember requesting it, but they thought I was drug addict. So they kept on saying she's a drug addict. No one could understand what was wrong with me. They diagnosed me with everything, but my behavior wasn't matching any of the kind of textbook mental health problems, schizophrenia, personality disorder, bipolar. Nothing was really showing. I wasn't displaying in that way. They thought I was a drug addict. She did give me this 2 milligram of lorazepam. And for a moment, I popped back for a night in this psychiatric unit. I popped back and this was 6 months out from stopping it. And I had a moment of relief and I was almost myself. But then I popped back in the morning, back to this withdrawal. It's just horrific. Got out of there, was discharged. No one knew what to do with me. Same story again. Back at my mum's, pacing the living room. Dad at this point has completely blocked me. I can't contact him. People are starting to step away. Family members, sister. There are friends that, there's only so much they can do. And I did have friends that really tried to step in and help. But yeah, it's hard when someone's in that place. My dad randomly, and I don't know whether this is like a universe miracle moment, but he was on a sailing boat in the middle of the sea and a guy called Hans was on that boat tapering his antidepressants, 2 antidepressants, and he had his scales and everything. And my dad was like, what is this? And he explained that he'd been harmed by these antidepressants and why, because he'd been taken off and put back on and all this stuff had happened. And my dad said, the penny dropped. And when he heard what Hans said about the lorazepam and how that was really, really, really bad medication and that he wasn't surprised that I was going through all of this and actually that it was a miracle that I was still alive in my third psychiatric unit, kind of wild. Anyway, he put me in touch with Hans and I was messaging him on WhatsApp. I'm completely wild and feral and not myself, but I've still got this survival instinct of like really wanting to get better. And he did suggest to take lorazepam again, but a low dose. So like 0.5 milligram, for example, or even less than that. And weirdly, I didn't have any, but a nurse who they kept on observing me, the mental health team through the NHS, they come around and observe you. Obviously, I wasn't getting any better. And a nurse came around and she just left some lorazepam there. So I thought, okay. And it took me a couple of weeks to just really like pluck up the courage to do it because I thought, fuck, I could be even worse. I don't know if that was possible, but maybe I could. And I thought, oh, do you know what? Maybe I'll just take the whole load because I just want this to end. But I was far too terrified to do that. So I took 0.5 lorazepam. Within half an hour of taking that, I popped back to literally how I'm sat here right now from a really non-functional, couldn't leave the house, running around kind of place. That's how that happened.
So that was the start of your tapering journey at that point.
Yeah, exactly.
And how did you decide which medication to start tapering first? Because you were on 4 different medications at that point?
So at this point of the reinstatement, I didn't stop taking the quetiapine. When I came out of that 3rd psychiatric unit, I stayed on the mirtazapine and the quetiapine because they were making me sleep. And that was the thing. Earlier on, when I took the risperidone or anything, nothing was putting me to sleep. I was just so activated. But the further out I got, maybe that's the only logic I've really got with this, is that it actually did make me sleep for 6 hours. So that was like giving me relief, but it wasn't helping anything else. Wow, like nothing else was helped. I wonder if it was those 3 together for some reason helped lock it back in. But it was the lorazepam that really was the key. Those were the 3 medications I ended up on.
How did you decide which of those 3 to start tapering first?
So the lorazepam, I'd got it through a private doctor before. And weirdly, a friend of mine, very, very generous friend, had contacted me a few days before saying, I have a psychiatrist who's really good. He's really expensive, but I'm going to pay for your first session. And I was in this kind of psychotic state being like, okay, yeah, sure, whatever. But then weirdly, that was really good timing because I was like, oh, well, I've got this session with a psychiatrist. I can talk to him about this. I managed to explain it all. And I don't think he really believed me, but he agreed to give me this lorazepam every day because that's what I needed. I needed it every day. I needed it for like a year or so in order to be able to taper off. So I had to really work out first, like, how am I going to get the medication? I really feel blessed actually for that moment because I don't actually know who I would have turned to for the lorazepam. I decided because the quetiapine was so huge, the dose, it was 400 milligrams. And in the reinstatement, I had gone from a really shocking place to a way more functional place. So no akathisia, no terror, no insomnia. I slept way better. I didn't have any of the weird sensations. My thoughts were normal. I could feel love for my dog. I hadn't been able to feel love or any sort of normal human emotion for so long. My thoughts were back in order. I actually looked at my dog and I felt joy. All of that came back. But when it came to night, when I took the quetiapine and the mirtazapine, that's when things started to really feel awful. And it was the quetiapine. It was the restless legs, horrible feelings when I went to bed. I just knew that quetiapine needed to go down. So I focused on that first. Through this psychiatrist, my friend, he was guiding me, but he did the classic thing of making it way too quick. And he did say at the higher doses, it is easier, which is true. But it definitely got to a point where that was not the case. And I needed to go to like 10% cuts. I did get to a point at like 150 milligrams where things went really like bad because I'd gone too fast. And I did think, shit, this is bad. I'm going back. You know, it felt like a really big setback. I managed to get down to 100 milligrams of quetiapine and I was so terrified to move it again. I just thought, right, I'm going to leave that there. It was really bad and I had to wait quite a long time for that to settle. I decided to just basically taper myself. I realized that doctors will always give you this very fast taper. Whereas when you're in the situation where it could kill you to do that taper, I had to really take matters into my own hands. And I actually found another psychiatrist who knows way more about this, still a psychiatrist, in that sense, like, because they haven't been through this, it's quite difficult. But they did understand the slow taper. So again, that was quite serendipitous online, searching, found this person who agreed to go slower. So then I decided to taper my lorazepam, water taper it. And that actually went really well. I did a micro taper. Tiny every day. And it was like night and day. It was like I just had a bit of air hunger, not really that bad, the symptoms. I had tried the mirtazapine a little bit, tried a 2.5 and another 2.5. Before I did the lorazepam, I did try the mirtazapine. It's like, try one, pause for a bit. If that didn't go so well, try another and just see which medication feels like you can move it. The mirtazapine was so bad, I felt like I was dying. Really, it was shocking. And me and my mum were having all these arguments. It was a really stressful living environment. That was giving me setbacks. And so I decided to leave the mirtazapine to the last because also it's really sedative and it makes me sleep. That's kind of how I managed to do it, was this step by step back to the 100 milligrams of quetiapine. I basically went back to that after pausing the lorazepam at a certain dose. I got down to 0.125 milligrams of lorazepam. And I decided to keep that there like, as a little buffer, which is my decision. It was a lot of feeling out what was the right thing to do. And maybe that would help me get off the 100 milligrams of quetiapine. I just wasn't sure what the right thing was to do, but that was my decision. And the 100 milligrams, after holding for all that time, I think it was about 8 months of going from 0.5 lorazepam to 0.125 lorazepam, that time just made such a difference to the quetiapine taper because I could taper it. And I actually had quite mild symptoms after all that time had passed. So it really showed me that holding sometimes is really, really good. And then I went back to the benzo, got off the benzo. So then I was quetiapine free, lorazepam free. And currently I am on 3.5 mirtazapine down from 30 milligrams.
So can you tell us a bit more about the symptoms that you experienced?
Yes. So obviously I've gone a little bit into the symptoms. I just wanted to cover like a few main ones, which is akathisia. I never know how to pronounce it. Being dyslexic, all these words. That's the inner restlessness and external movement as well. You know, it can be inner, it can be outer, it can be everything. Just wanting to tear your skin off your body. It can also cause suicidal ideation, very fast thoughts, this terror, absolute fear, chronic insomnia. And the symptoms, I think, can go into the thousands with this. And I suppose I just wanted to give a sense of what it could be like for somebody who hadn't been through this, who had tried drugs. I have never been on acid, LSD, or anything hallucinogenic, but I have heard that things like acid and LSD, are they the same thing?
Yeah, that's the same thing, yeah.
That's how naive I am. Yeah, so basically they're the same thing. Apparently, those trips are similar to benzo withdrawal or antidepressant withdrawal, but it's like way more dark and way more severe. And you've got all this other stuff going on, like the terror, the akathisia, your eyesight, your hearing, your movement, your senses, your everything. It's just horrific. Even like your body getting cold or really hot, or you feel like you're burning, your skin's actually burning, muscle twitches and jerks, anything that you could think about the nervous system, which is pretty much everything and how we work, is affected by this withdrawal.
What strategies did you develop to be able to deal with all these symptoms day to day and continue to live some kind of life?
Yeah. When I was in the withdrawal, it was really so severe. I was declining so quickly that there was nothing that helped. You know, I did try lots of stuff, but when the benzo withdrawal was active, and because I was given all this wrong information, it was just horrendous. But when I got that reinstatement moment and I got to kind of a better baseline, I was still very harmed and I still experienced waves of symptoms. And as I tapered, as I say with the quetiapine, I went too quick and I thought, oh my God, I'm back in withdrawal. And there was a few moments like that. And I did try things, you know, like I tried Reiki. I really wanted to work on my energy. I was really worried what the withdrawal had done. And so I did Reiki, and actually that put me into a setback for about a month. So, but I suppose coping would be distraction. Distraction is the biggest thing that got me through. And literally minute by minute, staying alive. Just stay alive. Everything is telling you to die. The external world is telling you crazy, there's no hope for you. Your internal world is telling you that you're crazy and there's no hope for you. And so it's really about staying alive and watching videos like this and having people say that you are still there underneath. Like I was still there underneath all of that. When I reinstated, I went back to me. I wasn't this suicidal, terrified human being. It is just staying alive. And, you know, things like meditation and all this stuff that people will say to you that will help, or like, go and do this, go and do that. No, in withdrawal, none of that. None of that is going to help you. But when you do get better and you do have windows, like for me with my reinstatement, that was like a window. I did find things like really gentle things like yoga nidra or yin yoga, where you literally just lie on the floor in certain positions. You don't actually do any exercise. Basically, what I'm trying to get across is there's not much that can help you whilst you're in the withdrawal. But when you do get better, it's really about being so gentle and not doing too much for your nervous system. Yeah.
Obviously, your medication journey is central to this story, but who are you outside of that, and who were you before, and what changed?
Before this, I was an actor, photographer for a good 10 years in London, freelance. I'd worked really hard to get there. I had sort of studied architecture at university, and it was the classic thing of doing something that wasn't quite right for you and not wanting to work in a 9-to-5 job. And I was very, very creative and free-spirited, loved traveling by myself. I often did that a lot. I did struggle with mental health when I was younger, in my sort of teens, parents splitting up, bullying, all sorts of pressures of society, what are you going to do with your life, and things like that. Like, I did struggle then, but I got through it. I got through it holistically, and I became this very joyful human being. The year before the pandemic was actually one of my best years in terms of work and happiness. I felt like things were really flowing. Work was flowing. I went on loads of really cool trips. I was feeling really fit and healthy in myself. I was really into my fitness and quite aware of the earth and the planet as well. So I'd gone like vegetarian. I hadn't quite cut halloumi out yet. I was a conscious being who really loved humans. I was really into my fitness, like I say, and I was jumping on trampoline every day for an hour or so. I felt at the peak of my fitness before this happened, basically. And so it was quite extreme for me to go to a place of all of a sudden everyone thinks that you're crazy and you're having a breakdown in the pandemic, when actually I wasn't having a breakdown. I even made something called the Corona Chronicles with my housemates. We just had loads of fun making this photo shoot because we were completely out of work in the pandemic. My acting, I was with a makeup artist, we had a photographer. And so we all got together and did this project, and we actually had loads of fun. And it was only until I had this tinnitus and got on the medication that things just went completely.
So you mentioned earlier that you did an interview with Ollie a few years back. What's changed since then?
Yes. So Ollie, at the time, I was on all my medications when I was talking to him. I'm now on 3.5 of my final medication. I never really thought how I was going to get here, but I have. And lots changed. I had to move so much. It was a real kind of step-by-step, how am I going to rebuild myself in terms of not being able to work, being really unwell for such a long time, trying to get back into life, moving from London to Devon, all sorts of things have happened. And I've had to really kind of change my life financially. Really, it's been such a struggle. As much as this looks really glitzy, which I do try. Financially, this has been such a struggle. But I started helping others through this, and I am training as a counsellor. And so I started to sort of retrain. Yeah, much has changed.
Going back to your experiences with the health systems in Spain and here and being in and out of medical institutions, do you feel like in those places that you felt seen and felt heard by the medical professionals?
Yeah. I actually wanted to say a bit about the doctor who gave me the medication, because it's kind of unusual, but / not unusual to be given lorazepam long term. Some doctors will say to you, oh my God, what was he doing? But other doctors, it seems to be like this sort of, it doesn't seem to be consistent, this over-prescribing. And with him, I really experienced a really unhelpful energy, totally like it's not the medication, I give it to old people, it's you. And that sort of carried on through the whole thing, really. I mean, I wasn't listened to. There was maybe one doctor who wasn't actually directly working with me who said, oh, it looks like you're in benzo withdrawal. And I was constantly repeating this, it's the lorazepam withdrawal, but not one person. And the Spanish place was barbaric, absolutely barbaric. I'm surprised people come out of those places, to be honest. And then the NHS was just very, I can really see, especially in the COVID, but pretty much all the time, the NHS is really stretched. And I found the system very, very cold. And, they come in and they observe you and they tick their boxes and they're not actually looking at what's really wrong. The whole thing, it was really eye-opening to see what actually it's like. And I personally think that it's really shit. Yeah.
You mentioned that you had some stories to tell about the psych wards, and I just wondered if you cared to share anything with us.
Yeah, well, there's so many. I think the general thing is that the contrast, I think, is so vast to my family on the phone being like, oh, you sitting around in a circle and having group therapy, and my friends being like, you're in the best place for you. Or not everyone was saying that, but I think that's what people tend to think when you go into somewhere like that. they're going to take care of you. But actually where I was put in those acute wards, and I think a lot of the wards in psychiatric units can be really full on places. I was spat at. I was called a white privileged drug addict by a lot of the staff. I was really like misunderstood and unseen. I was terrorized by a lot of the other patients as well. There was all sorts of things that happened. There was male patients being very inappropriate. I kept on saying, I want to go home. I need help. And one male nurse said, I've got something that will help you. And then just like grabbed his dick. These places are pretty horrific. You know, maybe there was one nurse that I met in that time that was actually really sweet. And I felt the energy, even in withdrawal, of a kind human being. And I could say that there was one that I met in those 3 psychiatric units that was a kind human being.
And in general, would you say with the NHS that you felt supported by NHS staff?
I would say I didn't feel supported by NHS staff. I just saw them going through their sheets and their assessments and their boxes and ticking and not seeing me as a human being and not listening to what I'm saying. At no point did anyone believe me. And it's like, look, I've been on lorazepam for 6 months. I came off it. Immediately, I have this reaction. And then also the fact that they kept on giving me more medication and all these movement disorders, and I looked like I was going to die. I remember one nurse, she was apparently worked for the NHS for 10 years and she was just awful. She would say the most awful things. And she said, I've never seen anyone so unwell as I have you, Emma. And she would say things to me like, oh, we're going to put you on an antipsychotic. So sometimes antipsychotics make your eyeballs go into the back of your head and sometimes your face will contort and sometimes it might stay like that. And it's like, they're telling you this whilst you're like absolutely terrified. And also the whole thing of like, have you had any suicidal thoughts or feelings in the last 24 hours? No. Okay. Have you did a little, it's really cold and sterile and shit. That was my experience through this. That was also in London. So yeah.
What do you wish doctors understood better about patients who are going through psych med withdrawal?
I wish doctors knew that it existed at all. I really wish that they just knew it was a thing. And I wish they knew how to taper people off medication properly. And that if they don't do that, someone is going to end up in a really terrible withdrawal that could be fatal because the person is not going to get the right help and they're going to end up in this loop like I did. Also that, there are people like me who are chemically sensitive and there are people who will take the medication and they're okay and they're not affected in this way. However, I feel like that only lasts so long. I've spoken to people who've been on antidepressants for 5 years. They've come off it with no taper because the doctor just said, you can just come off it. Nothing happens. They're okay. And then, a year later, maybe they decide to go back on another medication for something else, maybe another antidepressant. They go back on it. They're on it for a year. The doctor says, oh, you can come off it now. No taper. And then all of a sudden, because they've had that history, the withdrawal hits. And it's like, even if it doesn't happen immediately like it did for me, it can actually happen like later on. If you keep doing those very sharp movements of just coming off something really quickly or switching people on and off drugs, it's, there's so much I could say, but I'm sure we'll cover more.
What things do you wish that you'd known at the start of your journey that you know now? And what do you wish doctors had told you back then?
I wish that I never went on the medication, ever. And that the doctor had told me that it was a really strong, dangerous medication that's only meant for short-term use. And actually, it's pretty potent, to be honest. If someone had said to me, oh, okay, we're going to give you Valium, I would have known what Valium is. Like I've heard of Valium, but I'd never heard of lorazepam. If he'd given me the Valium, I would have said no. And so it's just really frustrating because there's this kind of naive part of me that just really trusted him. But I know that's how a lot of people get into this as well. Lorazepam has a name for itself as well. I think it's called Mother's Little Helper and it's got all these connotations around it. And I just had no idea. So I just really wish that I had known and that doctors had given me informed consent, told me of the risks of taking it, which, clearly they're not aware of. So,
What changes would you like to see in mental health provision in general? I
understand that some people do need, medication can help them. I don't always feel it's the first choice and it shouldn't be the first choice. I really feel that there needs to be lots of other things tried before you go on a medication. And I really wish that the system would promote that. And then there's also the fact that I do understand that, like I was saying, some people can be helped by medication. If you've got really bad anxiety or you're in a crisis, and perhaps it does take those feelings away. But then it's how is the doctor going to taper you off it? And that's what really needs to change, is doctors to really know how to taper people off. And actually, sometimes it includes syringes and scales and tweezers, and doing it like 5% every 2 weeks. It's much more delicate than doctors are currently practicing. I mean, there's so much stuff there. I personally believe that things can be healed holistically with the right therapist, the right team around them for whatever they're going through. Obviously, there's certain things like schizophrenia where psychosis, to help them with their psychosis, is pretty important. But again, there's such an argument with it because side effects can be huge. And so, yeah, I just wish that the system knew how much the side effects can actually damage a person, and that there is this real dark side to medication. It's not all like, here's a medication. It's kind of really strange to me that you're giving someone a medication for their brain and it's actually going to change your brain. And for some reason, they think that nothing could possibly go wrong with that, you know? Oh, yeah. And the amount of times I went into a doctor's office with all these side effects and they'd be like, well, we've never seen this before. You know, and it's like, how could you, with common sense, like a human brain, not understand that something like an antidepressant, antipsychotic, or benzodiazepine could really have a negative effect? So yeah, that's what I'd like them to know.
So it sounds like doctors were pretty unhelpful along the way, but who did help you and what resources did you find out there?
Yeah, it was really the online communities that saved my life. As I said, Angie Peacock, thank you, Angie, for existing and being so brave and authentic with your story, because yeah, without your videos, I just wouldn't have pieced it together. Things like the Facebook groups as well. Like I said, the benzo buddies, the benzo warrior community. What I would say with some of those is actually they were really terrifying. Like benzo warrior community tends to not be, that's more soft. But I think it's a few of the others tend to be quite scary. A lot of people on there, saying they're going to die and they've been like this for 10 years and, it's all the worst case scenario stuff. That didn't help me. But on one hand, it helped me to know that it is a thing, and I had to really then work out, what am I going to do? Surviving antidepressants, I did find that really useful. Again, it can be quite scary reading everyone's stories, but it's just got so much information on there that doctors will never give you on how to taper.
So when you left the psych wards, how did you begin to process everything that had happened to you? How did you unpack that trauma?
Yeah, I think that is ongoing because I'm still tapering, aren't I? I'm still on the mirtazapine, and there's always this kind of, the eternal taper. Like, am I going to get off it? Am I going to be fully normal again? And then having to kind of really be careful with my nervous system, because there's so much kind of trauma there, but I don't want to open it when I'm still tapering and I'm still sensitive, especially when you're in your kind of acute early phase of it all. It's like, actually, really, it's about just taking care of yourself as much as you can. And moving forward, what really helped me unpack it was actually following my passions and my joy. That was the only thing I could do, because it was so bad, this kind of, okay, I've got 3 medications. I have a lot of people on lots of medications and they're like, they kind of don't want to do it. They think, well, what's the point in living? I'm going to be doing this for the next 10 years. And I sort of thought the same thing, but I was also like, I'm not going to let this beat me. I've come back from the dead. I'm doing this kind of thing. Yeah, I sort of used my passions and my creativity, and I did things that I wasn't doing before, like my music and doing my own creative work.
What if I die on the psych ward?
Doing things like this, showing up a bit more for myself really has helped me unpack this. Like doing videos like this, unpacking what actually happened to me. When I watch these videos back and I listen to them, and I'm like, oh my God, that happened to me. Because sometimes it's so extreme. It's like, oh my God. also helping others on this channel. You know, now I'm obviously helping as a coach and training as a therapist. This is hugely helping me. I'm having personal therapy. I was already having that before, but now through my training, my therapy training, I have to have a certain amount of hours. So we have group therapy as well on my course. And it's just been transformational to have that support. Yeah. And I did last year feel brave enough to go to this Dance Through Your Grief workshop where I basically shook and cried and screamed, and you're sort of led through this journey with music and all sorts of stuff. It's quite kind of shamanic, no drugs involved, completely holistic. And I found it so powerful. And I think a lot of this can be trapped in our bodies as well. And it's really good to think about our bodies after this. But when you're ready, I could not have done that the years before. It would have been way too stimulating, unpacking all the trauma step by step.
And when you think forward to being healed, what would that mean to you?
So I think that would mean not having to worry about traveling. Like before this, I loved traveling, and I loved traveling by myself. I was really free-spirited and quite kind of, audacious with my travels. Whereas now I'm absolutely terrified to go anywhere and lose my medication. You know, if I went outside of Europe, I don't know what you'd do if you went and lost all your medication in like Japan or Mexico or somewhere like that, you know. And so for the last few years, obviously I haven't been able to travel, and I've not been well enough. That would be nice to have that freedom once I'm off the mirtazapine. Also, my nervous system and my exercise, and just to be back to like my full exercise regime, maybe not bouncing an hour a day, because I think that was maybe a bit too much, but I just love feeling fit and healthy, and I'd like that back. The mirtazapines made me feel very 80-year-old woman. And I know I don't look it, but it gives you that feeling of like you're like a piece of lead, which is really weird when before you were so kind of nimble. So that's like, my health, and not having to worry so much about what I'm putting in my body. I'll never drink again. And I've been sober for 4 years now. And I was drinking before, and I don't have coffee, and I only have some dark chocolate. So I think I'll always take care of my body now, obviously. And I think that it's been a big lesson of that. But it would be nice to just not worry so much about antibiotics, and you have to have an operation, and it's like you do have to worry about it, but it would be so lovely not to worry about it. Yeah.
So you just mentioned your health and eating better and not drinking being a sort of positive that's come out of the experience. Are there any other silver linings or spiritual lessons that you feel have come to you along the way? Yeah,
actually, like the drinking, I used to drink a glass of wine a night or two. And I always wanted to quit drinking, actually, because I could really feel that it was a habit forming. It wasn't a healthy habit. I'd get up and have my coffee. I'd do this bouncing, and then I'd, be busy all the day. And then I'd have my wine at night. And I know a lot of people live like that in London. There's just kind of like boom, 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 boom. And it wasn't good for me. I think the silver lining is I've slowed down so much. I'm sober. I'm never going to drink again. I'm really, conscious, a conscious human being of so much more than I was before. And also gratitude. It's quite hard. Like, I know the word silver lining is going to be quite difficult for a lot of people going through this. I still find it quite difficult to say, is there a silver lining? Because why should anyone have to go through this? And it's absolutely horrific. But for my mental health, I think it is useful to obviously think of the good. So thinking about my health now is good. And also what's come out of this is this feeling of I've got a second chance at life, and I'm going to do all the things now that I put off before. I was creative and I was doing lots, but I wasn't doing my own work. I was really trying to do my own work, like make films and record an album of music. It was something I always wanted to do. But each year passed and I never did it. And this experience has just put that fire up my arse. And I'm just going for it with my creativity now. And I don't know whether I would have done so much, or maybe I would eventually, but I don't know. It's like, it's given me a kind of new lease of life and this gratitude. I don't think I've ever felt that amount of gratitude before. And I don't think I ever will. Imagine, well, I know that you guys can. You're in withdrawal it's horrific. Or for people that are not going through this, you think your life's over and you're terminally ill and you're suffering for months on end. And then all of a sudden you're okay and someone tells you it's all gone away. It's like winning the lottery. And that feeling was like, that was seriously existential, amazing. I don't think I've come off that high just yet. Like, I do find myself moaning about the weather now, and I do, but like for a long time, I didn't moan about anything. I was just so happy to be here. And it really taught me that lesson of gratitude.
It sounds like from what you said earlier that it really inspired you to want to help others as well. And it's led you to training to be a therapist, and you're doing coaching work. Could you tell us a bit more about those aspects of your current life?
Yeah. So I always knew I was going to become a therapist, but the creativity and the music and the acting was so important to me. But I always knew I was going to be of service in some way. I was really deeply sensitive as a child, and I was really into all that stuff as well, like spirituality. I'm really into the soul and what makes humans work. Why are we all here? And also just looking under the surface of things, like there's so much about society that I feel so passionately about, like, God, if only men had a tribal initiation into life, and if only women had a tribal initiation into life, where, we'd be all so much kind of more prepared. Community and all these things feeds into wanting to be of service in some way. I've started training. Well, I am almost finished actually training my counselling course. With support, I don't actually know how I've managed to do this course whilst tapering and financially and all that, but I've managed to kind of like trust the universe with it all. The coaching, obviously, I've started with this. It's really about encouraging people that they are going to survive this, and also to share all the information I've gathered over the years I've gone through this, and how I've successfully tapered off these medications, and just the really important things that aren't being shared in a doctor's office. Yeah.
What gives you hope right now?
What gives me hope right now? I think what gives me hope is that I've managed to get off quetiapine and lorazepam, which were two drugs I never thought I would get off after all that stuff that went on. And so it's showing me that my brain is healing, and it is completely possible. And I see it in lots of other people that recover and that I help. And that gives me hope as well, is that it can feel so severe, the symptoms, and even this painstaking tapering of how slow it is. But what gives me hope is that the way that I followed that slow taper, it's been so successful before that I'm like, it's going to be successful again. So I suppose it's really the slow, excruciating taper is giving me hope that actually my brain will be able to adjust back, and I will sleep, without this mirtazapine, because mirtazapine has been sedating me now for 3 years. And that, I think, is one of my biggest things, is the sleep, getting my brain sleeping without this drug. But I have hope that that is completely possible, because I've managed with the other medications to come off them, and they were giving me all sorts of crazy stuff whilst I was on them. So, yeah.
Just a couple more questions left, and this one's quite an important one, I feel. If there are any doctors or mental health professionals out there who are willing to listen, what would you say to them?
Yeah, what would I say to them? Well, first of all, I suppose I should have said this first, but, I don't want it to feel like an attack or anything like that, but it is pretty serious, this, and people are suffering and people are losing their lives. And having been through it myself, it's just really devastating. It devastates someone's life. And also the fact that it's awful and it could be so avoided. And that's why I'm making this channel and I'm speaking like this, because there's no need for anyone to go through this. And I really want doctors and mental health professionals to know that this happens, and to not gaslight and deny it, and just look a little bit further than what you've been taught, because I don't think that there is much training on the medication. I've heard through the grapevine that there isn't actually that much training for doctors about what these medications do, certainly not how to taper people off. And I think it is that whole thing of like how obviously the pharmaceutical industries are making a lot of money, and there's this whole thing where they don't want to admit that actually maybe it might take 4 years to come off your antidepressant. That's going to be a hard thing to sell, isn't it? If someone was told that. So doctors need to know about this more and start giving the right advice when they're prescribing medications. And I also, lastly, really want doctors to become more holistic. But this is in my own kind of like dream fantasy land, where doctors are people who are actually very holistic people. And they're not people that are just straight on the medication immediately, because we're humans and our bodies are incredible and nature is incredible. And there's so much about the planet that's incredible. And we become completely disconnected. I could go on forever about that. But yeah, so I would like basically the whole system to change. Yeah.
Not asking too much.
Yeah. Yeah. And just lastly, for therapists, it's been quite hard for me to find a therapist that understands this and my drug withdrawal and the symptoms I experience. And so it can be so lonely. And it would be amazing if therapists understood this, that this is something that happens. Obviously, it doesn't happen to everyone, but it does happen to like more people than you'd think. And there is nowhere really for people to go. So again, here I am, hopefully helping.
So you said earlier that, there are various people who have helped you along the way through this journey. Is there anyone you'd like to thank today?
Well, I would like to thank Hans, if he watches this. He's been an incredible mentor and he's got so much knowledge on tapering and how the medications work. And he would be a great person, to go to. And, yeah, he's great. And without him and that advice and that meeting that in that moment with my dad, I don't know where I would be. Also, it was a miracle that the reinstatement worked, because that's not always the case. My friends, shall I name them?
Yeah, go on.
Yeah? Okay. I want to thank Roxy for paying for the psychiatrist, because I think that was quite a lot of money, like hundreds of pounds. I want to thank Anna for coming around my house when I basically called her up in a psychosis and was saying all sorts of strange things. She actually came round and she saw me, how I was. And when I got better, she actually runs retreats and she invited me on the retreats for free. And she really helped me, actually, Anna. And she also offered somewhere for me to live. There's Philippa, who actually, sadly, I'll be honest, I've lost this friendship now. And I don't know whether the whole experience sort of changed it really, but she'd come round the house and she would be there for me. And she was there when I got sectioned, and she came around the house and supported in the best way she could. Freya is another one who basically has chatted to me about this, and it's so extreme, but she's been there for me and she's been so supportive. There is a documentary that is being made called What's Up Doc, but it's been made by my friends, a production company that they sort of own and create themselves. So it has been a very long awaited journey, and I hope that it is finished one day. But Freya was interviewed on that and she did such an amazing interview, and she's just very supportive about this. And there's probably loads of other people, but I could go on forever. Well, Hattie, who was really just so lovely and supportive, and in her flat when I first of all went into benzo withdrawal, and she just was really kind and caring, and I just had that lovely kind and caring energy from her. Yeah. And if I've missed you out, I'm really sorry, because my brain is shut down and I could go on forever. This is going to be 2 hours long.
Yeah, we're coming to the end of this episode now, I think. And the last thing I want to ask you is, what's the future of this podcast? Where do you see it going? What are you hoping to do with it?
Obviously, we've gone to lots of effort to make it look really snazzy. And I'd like it to empower people to not feel like they need to go on medication immediately, going more into the holistic realm, but also actually talking about the dark side of medication and bringing awareness to it. Also specific symptoms. I'm going to be talking about all sorts of things because I've gone through it. There's going to be interviews with you and there's going to be interviews with people that I have helped and all sorts of people, basically. I'm looking to really expand it.
Well, that's the end of the questions.
Okay.
I just want to say, if anyone has been touched by what Emma has said in this episode, please do reach out to Emma and let her know what you think about it.
Yes. If you'd like to subscribe to this channel, this would be amazing, because it's really cool, isn't it, to have loads of followers? No. And also it's really about creating connections and collaborations and bringing awareness. And we are going to get this podcast on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. That's it, I think.
Okay, cool.
It's a wrap.
It's a wrap.
See you next time.